I made a video talking about the Smash Infection AU right before Christmas, and one of the main comments that kept popping up was what would happen if Sonic the Hedgehog ended up getting corrupted, which anyone who's familiar with Sonic knows would be a bad time for everyone, simply because of how strong and fast he is. But while I was scrolling on TikTok, I actually found a Sonic infected AU that I think is very interesting, and I think this will be a good way to say goodbye to TikTok, considering that it may be gone here in the very near future. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share the story with you all and also give my theories into how I think the virus started and how the crisis will likely end. Now, this AU is based on the My Little Pony Infection AU, which really isn't a surprise because My Little Pony has inspired a ton of Infection AUs. I think before the Smash one, I even covered one from the Fundamental Paper Education universe, so they are kind of rampant right now. Now, this one specifically takes place after the events of Sonic Prime, which basically places Sonic back in the Green Hill Zone with his friends. And the first sign of trouble doesn't actually happen until we see Amy and Big go out into the woods to find Froggy because the little guy seemed to have gotten lost. But while the two of them are searching through the forest, they end up getting separated. And while we don't know what happened to Biggs at this point, we know that Amy runs into a weird looking Mobian in the woods. And as you can see here, the Mobian is obviously like in its zombie form and it's oozing out black blood and has a hunger and thirst that are both at 100%, which explains why he attacked Amy in the first place and forced her to use that huge hammer to bash his head in. But unfortunately, she didn't actually attack him before he was able to injure her pretty good, taking her health down to 64% and her sanity to 70% because she felt guilty about actually having to take out another Mobian. Now, her first thoughts after the fight was to go and inform Sonic and Tails, partly because they are both like really strong and can actually help fight off any more of these sick Mobians, but also because Tails is really smart and may be able to actually come up with a non-violent way to deal with the threat. And in part 2 of the series, we actually see Amy make it to Sonic and Tails, stating that they have a big problem and sporting a nasty looking bite mark on her arm. And I'm sure we've all watched enough zombie movies to this point to actually know what that means. I also like that we have this brief moment where she is like shrouded in darkness, kind of foreshadowing that she will likely be taken by this virus in the future. And we get this confirmed in this slide here that shows that she is in the first stage of the infection. And we can also see that her hunger level is already at 51%, which is kind of alarming considering that she's only at stage 1 right now. Now, at the end of this part, we see that Tails ends up taking a blood sample from Amy so that he can do some research. And he also gives her antibiotics to help her with her symptoms. And then Sonic actually takes her home. We also see this slide here with Sonic saying that he hopes this isn't another virus, and I think that he's referring to the metal virus specifically, which you may be familiar with if you read some of like the old school Sonic comics. The metal virus was created by Eggman, and as the name suggests, it would turn living creatures into metal. And I think the last thing's worth mentioning in this part is that Sonic says that he's going to get in touch with Chaotix and poke around the city to see if he can find any information. And of course, at this point, they think that Eggman has something to do with it because, again, he was the one that actually made the metal virus, so it is very possible that he could have also made this one. Now, part 3 starts out by showing Vector and Charmy hiding from an infected Espio, and we learn that Espio was attacked by a wild animal out in the woods, but he didn't actually pay much attention to a wound, thinking that it would just heal normally over time. But soon he noticed that he was actually starting to feel weirder and weirder as the days passed, and he eventually locked himself in his room, refusing to speak to anyone or eat, until one day he actually came out, but he was in the last stage of the infection and starving. He would have actually tried to eat Vector and Charmy, but luckily Sonic was already heading to their base, so he was able to actually get there and neutralize Espio before he could do any real damage. But even though Sonic saved them, Vector was still traumatized from seeing his friend actually get turned into a ghoul and then get put down by Sonic. And in order to keep Charmy from being traumatized by the situation, Vector told them that the Espio that was taken out by Sonic was actually just a skinwalker and not the real Espio, which was a good call because Charmy, I think in this universe, is 6 years old and really shouldn't be forced to know something so cruel. And this is probably why Charmy's sanity is still so high and why he doesn't understand why Vector is so sad. Now, in part 4, we get more information about the virus, starting with the fact that Vector points out that Eggman likely doesn't have anything to do with this virus because he doesn't really mess with things that have like organic origins. And what this means is that if it was Robotnik, he would have done something that had to do with like metal, machinery, technology, or anything in that vein. which is really bad news for Sonic and his friends because now they don't really have a starting place as to like finding answers for this virus. And while the team is pondering what to do next, we see that Shadow and Rouge actually drop out of a helicopter and go to speak to the team. And from Shadow, we learn that the government will not be helping the Mobians with this infection because it only seems to affect animals and Mobians, so the humans see no reason to get involved and risk their life for the sake of animals, which is why we see Shadow actually call them racist bastards. And I'm a little conflicted with this because on one level, I do understand what the humans are saying about not wanting to risk their lives for animals, but on the other hand, Mobians speak, act, and live basically like humans, and I'm not sure I will be able to sit back and watch an animal die if it had the ability to act just like me or any other human. Take a moment to put down in the comments if you would actually leave the Mobians to fight for themselves or if you would try to help them with the infection. Now next we get Rouge's perspective, and we get to learn here that the government basically told her and Shadow that they need to go out as a pair and actually figure out what's going on, while also kicking all the Mobians out of the city, ensuring that there were only humans left inside. Basically only leaving them with a few resources and a helicopter. And I think this is why the pair actually went to go meet up with Sonic and the gang, so that they could at least try to figure it out and have some allies with them. And Rouge makes an interesting point when she asks the question, do they want to exterminate us? And I have to admit that it does feel like the humans may be playing a huge role in the destruction of the Mobian population, meaning that even if they didn't create the virus, they are definitely not doing anything to stop it from taking out a bunch of Mobians. Now, part 5 of the series starts out kind of weird, with Rouge claiming that Sonic and Tails have just been kind of chilling while the Mobian apocalypse has been going on, as if like they didn't just find out about it yesterday. But in a way, this also kind of serves as a way of letting us know that things are much worse outside of the Green Hill Zone. We also see Sonic finally reappear, and the first thing that he notices is that Shadow has a bite mark on his upper thigh, and while he claims that Rouge bit him as a joke, I do want to point out that on his stat chart, it did say that he was safe, but it also had a question mark there. So I wouldn't be surprised if something may actually happen with Shadow in the future, although right now he does seem to be healthy. Next, we actually get to take a look at Tails' diary, and it basically just talks about how Sonic is traumatized because he had to put down Epsil, which is why he was off screen for so long. Apparently, he was just curled up in his bed thinking about what he did. And the diary also talks about their plan to speak with Amy to see if they can learn any more about the infection by studying her. And Sonic is actually going to go out and like run around the Mobian settlements and see if he can actually like warn them about what's going on, since the humans have basically abandoned them at this point. And in part 6 of the series, we see that Rouge heads over to Amy's house to speak with her, only to find out that she has devoured a Flicky raw in her kitchen, showing that her infection is progressing. But one thing to note is that she hasn't lost her mind completely yet, because we see that she ties a bandana around her mouth so that it will be harder for her to actually bite and infect other people. And sadly, I think she tied that thing around her mouth to also keep her from biting herself, because before she ate the Flicky, apparently she was taking bites out of her own shoulders, kind of to sate her hunger. But since she did eat the Flicky, her hunger is kind of tamped down right now, so she's calm enough for Rouge to actually take her back to headquarters so that they can kind of talk to her and do some tests. Now, in part 7, the artwork changes about halfway through, so just be aware of that. But what we get to see here is that Shadow goes to the floral forest in order to find Cream and take her to safety. I assume that he also would have helped Vanilla as well, but it seems that she had went out to like the town to go to the store, leaving Cream home alone. And while she may be safe, it is just as likely that she ended up getting infected. So Shadow ends up telling Cream to gather all her stuff and her little friends so that they can go see Sonic, making sure not to tell her what's actually going on, because just like Charmy, Cream is also a child. I think she may be a little older than Charmy, but they're both still like really young. And that chapter is actually really short, so we move over to part 8, where we see that Tails is having a conversation with Amy, basically telling her that he will do his best to save her and to ease her pain, but he needs her to help him in actually figuring out what kind of virus is infecting the Mobians. And of course, Amy looks devastated here because she probably realizes that Tails will not be able to create a cure fast enough to actually save her. And while I know that it is cool to be a part of like the cure and to help your fellow people and all that, but it has to suck to some level to know that you probably won't survive it, even though she's gonna help save some people. And in the final scene here, we see that Shadow arrives at the headquarters with Cream, and then we see Sonic and her embrace. And then Shadow does something that I thought was really stupid. And basically, when Sonic gives him a look and asks why he brought Cream here, he says that he couldn't just leave her out there. But more importantly, he also says that he couldn't tell her that it's basically an apocalypse and that her mom may be dead. I feel like he definitely could have waited till him and Sonic were alone to kind of say that, because what's the point of trying to protect her if you're just going to ruin her whole little life right there? Especially when you consider that Vanilla may very well still be alive at this point. But with all that being said, now my working theory for this AU is that this is a virus that was definitely created by humans as a way to get rid of the Mobians, especially when we consider that the humans don't really seem to value the Mobians and only see them as regular animals. And also, a lot of the trouble that probably happens in this world is due to Sonic and his friends, so I would imagine that the humans probably don't really care about them all that much. And we kind of see evidence of that just with the fact that they don't want to help them at all with this virus. But with that, I also think that Eggman is probably going to make an appearance soon, since some of the regular animals are also been affected, and we know that he uses the animals to fuel his robots. So while I definitely think he will be more of like a anti-hero if he does pop up in this series, I still think it will be in his best interest to help Sonic and the rest of the Mobians figure out this virus. And while Tails is a genius in his own right, he is definitely not as smart as Eggman, so I think they'll be forced to bring him into the fold at one point or another. But that's just my theory for now. I'll make another video once we actually get another update to this series. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out this video on the screen here, and we'll see you tomorrow with another one. Peace, peace.